Hey vinyl fans, we're up here in the Vinyl Attic for another episode of Vinyl Fetish, where we are doing our 100 albums that matter. That matter to me, that I think should be in your collection. We're doing something that's very special to me. I mean, all these albums are special to me, that's why I'm picking them, duh. But this one is one that kind of took over my life. We're going to talk about the Jam's 1978 album, their third album, All Mod Cons. There they are. There's Paul Weller, Bruce Foxton, Rick Buckler. There they are. All Mod Cons. This is the British copy. Their third album comes out November 1978, and is kind of a really significant record. It's been ranked as one of the greatest British albums of all time, and it's got all this sort of respect. I wanted to kind of put it in context. When the Jam came out, the year before, they had two albums in 1977. The first one, In the City, and then This Is the Modern World. I used to have that sweater right there, that jumper. It was part of the punk scene, this power trio, very British, singing about British things, also evocative of the early Who, and was seen as sparking off the second mod movement, the mod revival. The mods were back. We are the mods. When it came out, it was kind of lumped in with the Sex Pistols and the Clash and sort of everything that was happening at the time, and mildly successful on the charts, but still part of this underground. In 1978, after they had these two albums out in Britain, they got a U.S. tour. They ended up on the opening slot for Blue Oyster Cult. This is the Don't Fear the Reaper band. Seems like an odd pair, but there was a lot of talk about punk rock, and everybody was trying to get on the punk rock bandwagon. And I remember this tour because I saw it. I was a big Blue Oyster Cult fan also, and I saw the show in Atlanta. But the Jam didn't open up that part of the tour. In Atlanta was a glam rock band that I also really loved at the time called Angel, who opened. They came out in holograms, but I was really bummed that the Jam wasn't part of that show. That show was recorded for the Blue Oyster Cult's live album, Some Enchanted Evening, and I'm convinced you can hear me screaming on that record, because some of it was recorded in Atlanta. Anyway, the tour ends. They go back to Britain, and Paul Weller, the mod god himself, hits a wall, hits kind of a writing block. Can't figure out what to do next. The punk thing has sort of become a cliche. The roots are still in the punk thing, but there's more out there, and he is trying to write songs. He's doing these demos, and the producer of the band that had worked with them for a while, Vic Coppersmith Heaven, was like, no, these songs aren't good enough. And then finally he realizes, I need to write something big. And we are distinctly English. I need to write something that is very English. And screw the rest of the world if they don't understand what the heck we're talking about. And the result was this album, All Mod Cons. I mean, it's sort of a pun on the fact that they were part of the mod revival. But also, All Mod Cons is sort of English slang for all the modern conveniences. If you're buying a new house, it's All Mod Cons. So about it's a little, little commentary on consumerism, and put together this record that is so cohesive, so telling a story. I mean, when I found it, I really sort of fell into the Jam in 1980 when Sound Effects came out and the song Start, which sounds so much like Taxman to me, and all of a sudden they were on TV a lot. They were on like Fridays, which was a great ABC comedy show, and I just really, really became a Jam fanatic in 1980. And so when I went back and got this record, it really reminded me of Quadrophenia. Quadrophenia, one of the great records of all time, that I don't even know if we have to talk about it because it's such an important record, but we probably will. So it was sort of this new version of, Quadrophenia only came out in 1974, so this is only 4 years after the Who's Quadrophenia, but it was so immediate and dynamic, and captured a lot of the energy of both the punk movement, but also where England was at the time. There's a brilliant nod to the Kinks on this album. They do a cover of David Watts. There's a lot of class commentary about the working class versus sort of the stockbrokers in Woking. And, you know, the guys that go to work in their nice suits, where the mods are like pretending that they're dressing up in their mod suits. And so there's a lot of social commentary. There are ballads. I mean, English Rose is this great love song that, where did it come from? This is supposed to be a punk rock band. And we really start to see the depth of Paul Weller's songwriting skills. But also, I got to give a shout out to Bruce Foxton, because one of the other bands that was sort of coming out of the punk rock scene at this time, 1978, was the Stranglers. And, you know, punk rock was a lot about guitar and drums. Any guitar and any bass drum, like as the Jam would say. And the Stranglers and the Jam on this record have a lot of really cool, intricate bass playing that you're like, what? That's not punk. It sounds a little bit like jazz. And it's funny because later, you know, when Paul Weller breaks up the Jam and forms the Style Council, then it's all about the jazz. They're the jazziest combo out there. The sort of quintessential song on this album, I mean, there is reference to sort of the state of violence in Britain at the time. A Bomb on Wardour Street is a song. It's really about the fact that they found an unexploded World War II ordnance on Wardour Street, where the record label Polygram was located, and had to shut down the street. But it's also about the sort of rise of the racist skinheads in Britain. But then that leads us to this sort of penultimate track on the album, which is Down in the Tube Station at Midnight, which is about a guy going home with a bit of curry for his wife to get on the subway, which is the Tube in London, and being attacked by a bunch of right-wing thugs, presumably skinheads. And there is a cinematic vision to this record in the way that sort of the Kinks were doing it in the early 70s. It really sort of creates this picture of where Britain was at. I went to school. I've mentioned before, I think a few times, I went off to school in London in 1982, and was in the land of the Beatles. That was draw number 1, but the land of the Jam was number 2, and regularly would go to Carnaby Street. Bought this t-shirt in 1982 on Carnaby Street. Shopped at a store called Melandy that had a little sign in the window that says Paul Weller shops here, to buy my striped mod shirts, and became a serious mod. Ended up, you know, came home, bought a Vespa scooter, spent, you know, a couple years just shopping and being a mod in London. There's a picture of me somewhere on Carnaby Street in my mod gear, and these like British mods are looking at me like, you poser. But it was really, really kind of everything to me. In fact, when right as I was about to leave London in the end of summer of 1982, the tickets went on sale for the final Jam concert at Wembley, and I was so crushed I was going to miss them. And I didn't end up seeing Paul Weller until Live Aid in 1985. They played at Live Aid, and then I've seen him a few times here in the Pacific Northwest, and he's always great. His records continue to be great. But one of the things that was cool about the mod revival is it brought out this kind of new bohemianism. It allowed sort of the punk energy to be fused with sort of beatnik aesthetics. And one of the cool things about the Jam is they were really into like poetry and jazz and fashion and a statement. A lot of their work was inspired by the Liverpool poets, especially Adrian Henri. This is one of my favorite poetry books, these Liverpool poets. In fact, a lot of the lyrics from Jam songs come from the poetry of these guys. And I wanted to read you one of my favorites, because teenage poetry, I think, is so important. I think teenagers need poetry. They don't have it. Poetry is not supposed to be esoteric. It's supposed to be about the lives of young people. And that was the kind of, when the Jam came out, they were like 17 and 18 years old. Like, they were teenagers when the first records came out. They were very, very young, and they were really singing to their own cohort, not for a wider audience. They were singing to the people that were in front of the stage, the other teenagers. And I wanted to read you this one poem. This is my favorite. It's called Tonight at Noon, which is also, of course, a Jam song. And it was the title was taken from a Charles Mingus record. And I wanted to read you this Adrian Henri poem, because this kind of captures the essence of what the Jam were all about, talking to their generation. There's your Who reference. Tonight at Noon for Charles Mingus and the Clayton Squares. And the Clayton Squares were a Liverpool band in the mid-60s that played at the Cavern, and people thought they were going to follow the Beatles out, and they never made it. Tonight at Noon. Tonight at noon, supermarkets will advertise 3p extra on everything. Tonight at noon, children from happy families will be sent to live in a home. Elephants will teach each other human jokes. America will declare peace on Russia. World War I generals will sell poppies in the streets on November 11th. The first daffodils of autumn will appear when the leaves fall upwards to the trees. Tonight at noon, pigeons will hunt cats through city backyards. Hitler will tell us to fight on the beaches and on the landing fields. A tunnel full of water will be built under Liverpool. Pigs will be sighted flying in formation over Woolton, and Nelson will not only get his eye back but his arm as well. White Americans will demonstrate for equal rights in front of the Black House, and the monster has just created Dr. Frankenstein. Girls in bikinis are moonbathing. Folk songs are being sung by real folk. Art galleries are closed to people over 21. Poets get their poems to the top 20. Politicians are elected to insane asylums. There are jobs for everyone, and nobody wants them. In back alleys everywhere, teenage lovers are kissing in broad daylight. In forgotten graveyards everywhere, the dead will quietly bury the living, and you will tell me you love me tonight at noon. Got a little chill. Adrian Henri, this book is near and dear to my soul. So the mod thing, really kind of exploded again. The original sort of 1964 mods were now back in the late 70s thanks to the Jam and this album and this great need to communicate what's happening right now with young people. And I would like to say there are modern versions of this. I mean, I think Olivia Rodrigo's Sour album, made by another 17-year-old, is about talking to other young people. Like, this is what's going on right now. Old people aren't going to understand what we're talking about. But let's talk about our world. Let's have that immediacy of that connection. And I think it may be a weird juxtaposition, but I think there's a direct link between the Jam and Olivia Rodrigo and the need for young artists to communicate to their own generation. Talking about my generation. The Jam did it. All right. I think I've got one of the great things about the Jam was a ton of their stuff wasn't on their albums, was on their singles. And I used to go to Wax and Facts as a teenager to buy Jam 45s imported from Britain. And I think I'm going to do a separate little episode of Vinyl Fetish about all the vinyl Jam I have, especially the 45s, because they are prized collections. Okay. That's the Jam. The Jam. If you don't know, I'll put the link in the description. Listen to this album. It is just freaking brilliant. Every song on it is great. And we just love Paul Weller so much because he has kept the fire burning, the mod fire burning. He's as cool as he ever has been. Love that man. And I bought clothes to look like him. So there you go. Okay, cool. Next week, we're going to jump back across the United States. We're going to stay in the 70s and do a record that is also significant in my life and really important. Somebody who also is still here, and we cherish her while she's here. We're going to talk about Linda Ronstadt, and we're talking about her album, The Heart Like a Wheel. We're going to talk about Linda Ronstadt. And I love Linda. I have a lot to talk about her. But for now, oh my God. This record mattered so much in my life. Like, it changed where I went to school. I went to London, changed the way I dressed, changed the way I cut my hair, changed the way I read poetry. I mean, this album matters, this band matters, this music matters, you matter. Let's talk about it.